Last week, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, a group that's always looking for ways to improve the futures of children in America, reported a continued disparity between children of different races nationwide. They found children of color were at a bigger disadvantage due to a lack of investment.
The report listed Michigan among the worst for inequity based on several factors. They looked at early childhood, family resources, the neighborhoods they live in, and education on a scale of 0 to 1,000, with 1,000 being the best. Black children in Michigan scored 268, while Asian and Pacific Islander children scored around 800. The study says Michigan's children are far behind the national average when it comes to fourth grade reading level, high school graduation, and college degrees.
Joining us now via Zoom is Kuhnen, Kids Count Policy Director for the Michigan League for Public Policy. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Just want to start with your thoughts on this study and also the numbers that we're seeing as far as Michigan is concerned.
Yeah, so what this report really shows is that there have been significant improvements in child well-being across all races and ethnicities since the Annie E. Casey Foundation first released the first version of this report about 10 years ago. But of course, wide and historical disparities are persisting. So what this report really shows is that we need policy solutions that respond to the unique experiences as well as the unique barriers faced by different racial and ethnic communities. And, if we use the right policy solutions, that we can really close some of these gaps in well-being and increase access to opportunity for our kids.
So part of this report is this index that was used, the Race for Results Index. Can you explain exactly what that is and how those scores we mentioned, how those are arrived at and the takeaway from those numbers?
Yeah, so the index is really used in order to be able to make comparisons across states, right? So we might look at, in some cases, data that's like whether babies are born at a normal birth weight, right? And that's measured differently than, say, eighth grade English or eighth grade math proficiency. And so putting it into an index form makes it possible to look across states, across race and ethnicity, right? How can we compare kids? So that's the benefit of using an index for a report like this.
And when we're looking at these numbers, how much of it, Anne, is linked to socioeconomic issues and maybe education background for that specific family? What are some of the factors that make this equation come into play?
Yeah, so definitely some of it comes down to socioeconomic status, education of parents, right? But we know that a lot of that too is driven by historic kind of a legacy of racist policies in our country, as well as ongoing racial bias that we see today. So there's definitely some evidence of kind of social and economic status playing a role in child outcomes, but so much of that is a result of our own systemic issues.
So this report is based on data that was compiled before a number of recent policies went into effect. What policies are those, and do you think that they can really make a dent in the racist policies and pattern that you just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the data from this report really focuses on the year 2021, when, we know that there were a lot of disruptions facing families, and of course, some federal policies put in place to help kids and families cope with the pandemic. But, since then, just last summer, Michigan passed a really historic budget in terms of our education budget, the funding of what's called an opportunity index, in order to provide more funding for schools with large numbers of at-risk or socioeconomically disadvantaged students, as well as, other really great policy decisions. One that I'll just point out is universal free school meals. This is something that the federal government enacted during the pandemic and that Michigan continued into this school year. But of course, we know that that's temporary. That has not been made permanent. So while there have been some, big budget kind of investments in kids in the last year, there's still more work that we need to do. Just to point out one other that I think was really amazing last year is that Michigan passed, or I should say, we increased our earned income tax credit. And that's a tax credit for families, oftentimes families with children. Um, we quintupled it last year. And so that, again, hadn't come into effect yet when this data was taken, but will obviously have a really big impact on reducing poverty for working families.
Well, absolutely concerning, disturbing really to see some of these disparities, but encouraging that we might be seeing some trending in the other direction. Ann Kuhnen of the Michigan League for Public Policy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.